Welcome, guys, to another episode where we make a game using Unity Engine. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you guys to all of our subscribers and whoever watches our YouTube channel. This wouldn't be possible without you guys. If you're new to my channel, um, click that bell icon and that subscribe button. First the subscribe button, then the bell icon to get notifications of when I upload new videos if you want to continue the series. If you're new to the series, watch the first video. So thank you guys. If you guys want a way to help me produce content and support me on what I do, head over to my Patreon page. The links are always on the description down below. And hit us up in social media. Okay, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear what you like, what you think about these content, what you like, what you want to see, and everything else. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so um, I'm gonna open up Unity real quick to have a recap of where the hell is it? Da, 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 da. 2D. I think it's this one. Forget the name. So yeah, let's see what we have so far. Okay, so far we have this player, these two players actually, and the ball wanting to go up and down and whatever, and we can hit it back and forth, and if somebody misses the ball, um, we score. I'll just try to miss. I'm gonna put it right there, and there you go. Let's go into our script, namely Match Manager. And we want to know what is the highest score to win. So, well, we just need one. And this is going to be an integer. And we are going to say, okay, score to win is going to be whatever. Let's say 5 for now, right? And let's see, how do we want to do this? I guess every time we add a score, we want to check, right? Um, public bool check player win, right? We just have to say pass in the player ID here, and this is player ID. And so we are gonna be calling this here check player win, and we want to say player ID, right? And then we pretty much just want to fetch the score, and we want to say, huh, well, we'll pass in the score as well, since I don't want to current score or something like that. I don't want to fetch a lot. Since we already have it here, we'll just pass it in to this function, and it's gonna be so we're gonna say, okay, result is gonna be false originally. We're gonna return that result at some point, and we're gonna say, okay, if actually we can just say result equals new score or current score is greater or equal to. So what do we want to do? I guess we can return true if it wins, okay? So we're gonna say current score, if it's greater or equal to, then this dot score to win right? It's going to return if it is greater or equal to, then the score. And we can just say equals equals because we can't really go past it, and it'll just have to check it. So this will return true only if whoever scored, which is going to be our player ID here, um, reaches this maximum, right? And for now, we can say, okay, um, if it's true, that means somebody won. So we can say here to do someone won here. There. And we can just say, okay, debug the log error formats, and we're gonna say, okay, um, we'll say player one or two, one, right? And we pass in the player ID, and that is it for now. So now when we go back here, oh, there's some errors. What is that? What? Local variable named result is already defined in the scope. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about, dude. So sometimes because I haven't fixed the issues with this with the SLM stuff for this project, whenever I open it through just double clicking the scripts, it messes up. So I don't know why that does that. So I just gotta, I guess it doesn't load anything, it just loads the file. Where was we? Match manager. So we were here. We just did this. Return result. It says check player win, not all code paths return a value. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh. Sorry for the language. It was that I misspelled return. Why can't you just say that, huh? Why can't you just say, hey, you misspelled return? Okay, let's try this again. So now, let's see, okay. Somebody scored one. Let's see who wins. Maybe another thing we can also do later, because the ball doesn't really, it takes a while for it to, when it generates some weird, like that one was fine. But when it generates a weird direction, we still have to do something with that, because the actual magnitude of the direction might be more than one at some point. So we gotta make sure that, damn it. Oh, oh, here we go. Player 1-1. Missed it, but there it is. So what we can do there, is, I guess, do something. We could either, at this point, we could either restart the match or go to the main menu. Since we do not have, since we do not have a main menu, we can just restart the gameplay. So we're gonna say on player one, and we just call here on player one. And we just reset scores. And I guess that's it for now. So eventually we want to differentiate between somebody who won and somebody who lost. So that when somebody wins, we can make him proceed to the next level or something, or the next match. And whoever lost goes back to the main menu. We'll think about that later. But for now, we can just reset the scores. We could also reset the ball, which we may need to want to do the following. Let's see, private. We'll say ball, and we'll say, I don't know, ball or something. And we'll eventually need to have all the players as well. The match manager is going to be responsible for creating the players. Player paddle, I believe it was. Player paddle, so player one. Or let's see, we could just have a list of player paddles. Players, and we'll just say new. And by having a list like this one, it lets us have multiple players if we ever need multiple players. And it also lets us fix the bug that we currently have where the players are in totally opposite sides from their controllers. So the match manager can actually be, okay, you're the first player that is active, so we're gonna put you to the left, and the right player, you're always gonna be on the right with this control, with these controls, okay? So that's what's going to happen at some point. We may get to it today. We'll see. So here we just want to say, okay, player or sure, player info. This is just score info. And that is it for now. If we wanted to, we could do something like void create players or something like that. And then we would also have maybe something like um, private int max num players. And for now, we'll just say we only have 2, or we can say player ID dot size if we cast it to an int. So when we create a player, we want to create a new game object. We'll call it player. We'll say, okay, player, you're gonna be a new game object, and we're gonna name you, I don't know, player underscore something here. So maybe we need an ID here. And we'll just say ID. And we'll need to make sure that you have the following, actually, new type. So we need to make sure that it's got the following stuff to make it work properly. So it needs, you know what? Okay, so let's do something a little bit more advanced. So let's talk about prefabs. So what are prefabs? Prefabs are pretty much um, it's a game object that you save on disk with um, the desired structure needed for something to function properly, so that you don't have to do what I'm about to do, right? So right now, what what I was about to do was to construct the player, right, manually. We don't need to do that. We can just grab your game object that you want, right? Drag it here into the prefabs folder or any folder where you want it, and you just drag it there and it creates it. Boom. So now we can just rename it to player paddle, right? And everything, gets renamed properly. So now what we need to do is we want to use this player paddle. So now we can actually delete these, right? From the game, we'll save that. And the match manager, since we have it in the prefabs folder, we'll need to get the prefab. So we need the actual prefab here. But later on, we'll let you know. I'll let you know how you can actually I'll let you know how you can actually load something from a resources folder. Because this may be useful in some other places. Oh yeah. Now, the issue that we have. Okay, so this is why we need sometimes a resources folder, right? So right now, my match manager, because it's a singleton and because it sets itself up, it um, it's not here. It creates itself. Now we could just drag it in here and set it up, kind of, because we wouldn't be able to set up everything ourselves. We'll go through that. We'll create the resources folder. So we already have it here. So now what we need to do is we need to get this guy and move it to the resources folder. And now what we need to do is we need to load it from file, right? So how do we do that? So we need player paddle prefab. So we first need to load it, and how we load it is we gotta say resources dot load, and we can say, okay, we got a string path. The string path is relative to the resources folder, which it tells you right here. So all we gotta do is say uh, player paddle, and that'll tell it, okay, we need a player paddle. Now we can cast it into the paddle itself. Now what we need to do is, if we do have this object, we just need to load it now, or instantiate it. Instantiate, and we pretty much pass in the prefab that we just created or loaded. We didn't create it. The don't need that. Let's see, what else do we need? We need a position. So if it's player, well, this will be actually, we'll set it right now for like -9 for the player, but this will actually change since we allow screen sizes to change. So that will change but for now, we'll do that, right? And we know that the X is gonna be like some X position, and the Y is going to be 0 because we want it centered, and the Z is going to be 0 as well, right? So let's construct that position. So X position, we're going to say, okay, if the ID is 0, we want the X position, and this is a float, we want the X position to be, let's say left, right? So it's -9, otherwise 9. And let's see, I think it also needs creates a new vector with given x, y, z positions. Transform. Oh, it's because this particular thing takes in also a rotation. Let's see, where's the minimum? Right there. So for that, we just need a quaternion.identity. That means that it has no rotation. And we just cast it into, actually, yeah, we just do that. Oh, it's an object, right? As game object. We could just get the paddle like that and just say that. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, based on the ID that we're getting into this function, we're gonna say we're gonna move it either to the left of the screen or the right of the screen, right? If it's ID 0, it's gonna be moved to the left of the screen. Otherwise, it's gonna be moved to the right of the screen. Okay. Now, player resources.load loads a any object that you have within the resources folder. We currently have player paddle. Make sure that you spell it correctly. So a good idea is to copy it and paste the name, and then we cast it into a player paddle. Now this is not the object itself. Now we gotta instantiate it into the world. To do that, we'd use instantiate, which is part of the game object or object class. Then we pass in the prefab, or the object we need to load or instantiate. Then we pass in the position with our X offset, and we pass in an identity with a quaternion, which means that it has 0 rotation. A little bit on instantiate. So there's a couple of rules that you want to follow for this instantiate function, and that is that you don't want to do it every frame or you want to limit it to the amount of instantiations you want to do per um, per like so whenever you use instantiate, you don't want to do it every time. You don't want to do it every frame. You want to do it at load time. So this function is just going to be called once per game, right? Whenever we do reset, we are going to call it, but um, yeah. And we can also do this. So we can just say add 0 here so that every time we create a player, um, it does this, right? So now we can say, okay, in it when we create this, we still gotta do the for loop, right? So we're gonna say player ID, it's gonna be 0, player ID, it's gonna be less than player ID. Now we want the other one. Actually, no, because we already have that as in max non-players. Player ID plus plus, and then we just say create player with the player ID. Now we do want to change how the paddle works here. So let's do public void setup, right? And we want to pass here a player ID of some sort. And then we want to do pretty much this, right? We want to do that. We don't want to do this anymore because what is it called? The match manager is actually telling us what player ID we have. So we gotta do that. Now the controller needs to change as well. Where is controller? We can just right click and go to definition and tell it, okay, we are gonna tell you now what player ID to get. Dun, dun, dun. And we don't have to worry about that since the match manager is worrying about that. And we just say player ID here, player ID, player ID. Boom. Okay, so we pass in now here the player ID. We're just gonna cast it to that. And that's pretty much it. We could also pass in the controls, but I think it's okay for now that this will do that. And let's see, we aren't doing anything with position at this time. Cool. So let's go back to the match manager, and now we should be creating all the players through the match manager. Um, and and they should be positioned properly now. And what we have to do now after we create that player is not forget and add it into our players thing, right? So we can keep track of them right here. And we have player paddle prefab here. So something else that we can do is we can say, okay, only load this because we're caching it now. We're gonna say player paddle prefab, right? If it's null, only if it's null, we want to load the actual file, right? Only if it's null. And we can move this to be here. And we want to do this. We still want to check if it is not null, because we never know if we, typed in the wrong thing and it doesn't exist, so then we're gonna crash. Or we could use assert. I don't know if we have assert here. No, I don't know where assert is, but we could assert it so that if it is, I guess a way we could do that is like if player prefab is still null here, then we can just throw a new system exception, or system dot exception. We can say maybe null exception if we find it. Invalid cast. Let's see. Do we have null exception? Null reference exception, right? And we can pass in maybe like where we found this. So it's going to be in the match manager, create player, and we can also pass in the index if we wanted to. But for that, we need to actually do a string dot format to format our string and to pass in the player ID, which is just ID. Boom. Now we don't really have to check this anymore. So this code is not going to be run if we do have an exception, right? So that is what assert does. Assert is like if this is not what we want it to be, then it throws an exception, halts the program, and it tells us. And now we can, let's see here. These are not, yeah, these aren't, okay. Should work like that. I don't think we are missing something here. So we do have a null reference exception, right, where we did this. And we're not loading in that. Create player with ID. So what happened there? Let's run it again. And what we want to see is whenever we get that error, right? We got the error, and we aren't loading the player paddle at all. What we can do to test it out is we could. I don't think it's gonna work like that, cause yeah. I would show you how we can debug this, but so maybe we can just say, yeah, I would show you how to debug this, but I can't at the moment because so in order for us to debug this, we have to be able to talk with Visual Studio to Unity, which by default you cannot do that. And to be honest, I feel like that's pretty dumb, but it's not set up to do that yet because I had to uninstall stuff, and now my dev environment is not what it used to be. So why? You know what? We're gonna say game object, and then we'll just say player paddle equals player dot get component player paddle and we have to make sure that the player exists before we can call it. And then the paddle exists. Because someone might have messed with it and blah blah blah. Okay. Let's try it again. Okay. So it works now. Which not completely because now I cannot move. So there's another issue with this that let's see why. So whenever that goes over there, we create the paddles. I need to be able to debug this and controller, so we want to make sure that we can see our controller. So we are going to go to the controller and we're going to make sure that this says system.serializable and that we actually have view into this. So we do that, we do this, and we make sure that we do that as well so that we can see that. And dun, 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 dun. Okay, so our controller tells us that, what? We don't have key bindings. Why is that? Did we never? Yes, that's why. We never told the match manager to, let's see, so panel dot setup is never called, right? So then we're gonna pass in the setup ID and everything should be fine. Now, yes, you're gonna be saying, well, it's not fine because, you know, um, the paddles get loaded until somebody scores. Why? That's, we'll see right now why exactly. But as you can see, we actually have, we can move the players now up and down again. This time they're on the correct place. So player one is on the left side and player two is on the right side, right? So that's what we wanted. Now, what we also want to do is we want to create the ball the same way. But why is it that every time somebody scores, it goes, um, it generates the match manager? And we'll see why in a second. So we call ball collision, actually goal. So goal says, if somebody enters me, my bounds, which is the ball, and um, and so then we get the player um, goal is like, okay, so we're player, let's say we're player one goal or something, and we're here, right? So when we say if match manager exists, what we're saying is we're calling this right here, right? And we're calling this instance. This instance is going to go through the motions of creating the instance if it's not there, and that's why it gets created when somebody scores. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking. We need to change that, right? And we do. Um, we do need to change that at some point. So I guess for now, because we don't have any other way of doing it, for now we can say, okay, when I start the menu or the score panel UI, I want to make sure that the match manager um, exists. And we just gotta call this to actually make it show up, right? If we had a loader, then that would be taken care of in a different place when we transition into loading this scene. But we aren't yet doing that. And maybe at some point we'll think that actually having it here already is going to be better. But even then, somebody still has to call it to get that instance. Right? And there we go. We actually created this. We created the panels right away. Now let's see what happens when somebody scores all 5. Come on. Three. actually have to make sure that it goes that way. And we'll also be fixing later on the slowness of the ball sometimes to make it, you know, fast at all times. Okay, so okay, well, that was kind of interesting because so now we gotta fix some other thing, right? So whenever we reset it, it worked because when we scored again, it showed that we had won. But now we gotta tell this system that we want to update the score um, through an event like we have done with the goal, like so. So that will be pretty simple. We just copy this. We want to put it, well actually, do we want to put it here? We'll actually have to think about where we want to put it, okay? Because we can't just put it there. Um, and that's it. Okay. So I think we'll stop here for today. We have done a lot, or well, not too much, to be honest. But we got the match manager loading things up, right? We have created a player already, and we create the maximum number of players that the um, player ID enum has stored, and we properly load in the prefab that we want, create the player, and set up the paddle which sets up the controls properly. Okay. Now what we need to do now is we need to do the same thing to the ball, and we need to maybe have a delay before we start to let the player know, okay, it's starting, you know, like a countdown. And we also need to know, or what we also need to update at some point the player scores. Now, what we could do instead of updating this whole thing is we could just reload this scene, right? So, you know, let's do that instead. I believe it's scene manager. Yep. Scene manager dot load scene. And we can either pass it an ID or we can pass it this. I think it's called demo for now. So all we got to do now is, yeah, it's called demo. So, okay, so now with Scene Manager, to actually load scenes, you have to make sure that you go to the build settings and you have your scene that you want to load inside of this scenes in build. It will not let you load anything until that is done. So now if we let player 1 win again, which it might take a little bit of time, 2, 3, 2 more. 4, and 5. And see, um, we restarted the level. Now something happened, not sure what, that the match manager decided to only load one player. And so we gotta look into why that is. We still have this guy here. We don't have any control over him, but that's another way we could do it. Okay. Well, thank you guys for watching this video. I know it's a little bit long, but I feel like you get more out of these videos when I show everything without having cutscenes or whatever. You get more of it because you get to see my process, my thought process, and I get to explain things in more detail at some points. You get to see me mess up, which is good because then you get to see me think about the problem at hand and how to solve it, which allows you to see how to solve something, how to approach a problem. If we had this debugger working, then that would be more powerful because then you'll see how to exactly debug something on your own. Um, If you liked this video, don't forget to like the video. This will allow YouTube to this will let YouTube know that this video was worth watching, so it'll share it with more people. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell icon to get notifications of new content. If you want to help me or support my series so I can make more videos faster and, you know, more series, maybe multiple a day, or not a day, but a week instead of just one, go to Patreon. Go to my page in Patreon and sign up there. Links are always on the description down below, so if you don't know where something is, go to the description and you'll find the link you're looking for. And yeah, hit me up on social media if you have any questions, if you have any comments or concerns. Let me know what you think about these series. Let me know what you want to see more of, so I can make it happen. This is for you guys. Thank you and have a great day.